Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined as always by Agri-Pulse Senior Editor Phil Brasher, discussing the week that was, agriculturally speaking, in Washington, D.C. And want to start this week with some news that was really anticipated to be the big news out of the month of September for Congress, and it was. There is a continuing resolution was passed this week out of the Congress. There will not be a government shutdown. And Phil, once things got moving on the CR this time around, it really got moving pretty quickly.
Yeah, and the end game was fairly clear for the last couple of weeks, but you have to do this sort of dancing back and forth. It's very important to the Democrats, particularly in the Senate, to get funding for Flint, Michigan to deal with the drinking water issues up there. The Republicans wanted to deal with it with the Water Resources Bill, which we'll also be talking about a bit. The Senate put money for Flint in its version. The House had not. Democrats over in the Senate insisted that it be put into the stopgap spending bill, this continuing resolution that you talked about. Ultimately, what it came down to is the Republicans in the House said, okay, we'll stick it in our water resources bill. That's where it belongs. We'll assure you we'll deal with that after the election. The Democrats over in the Senate said, okay, we're fine. We'll go ahead with we'll sign on to pass the continuing resolution, keep the government going, government shutdown averted. We thought that's where it would end up, and that's how it played out.
So as we mentioned, no government shutdown as of yet for 2016. This CR funds the government through early December, so the government, Congress specifically, has until early December to kind of dot their T's and cross their I's as far as things that need to happen to make sure that an omnibus spending bill, or maybe if they can get their act together and pass all of the appropriations bills in the correct process, maybe something like that can happen.
That's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
Probably, what they're talking about on both sides is passing sort of bundles, smaller bundles of these appropriations bills.
A minibus, I think they're calling it.
Minibuses, as they call them, instead of an omnibus. Democrats don't like that very much, partly because it means, some bills like defense, they probably get through. What about interior environment? Republicans would like to really cut spending over at the EPA. It'd be very easy that the interior environment bill gets left out of that process. So that's still to be decided, but the Republicans are very much talking about doing these smaller groups of bills, the minibuses.
Yeah, so whatever size of transportation they choose to name their bills after, we'll be sure to keep you up to date on those bills and what they mean for agricultural interests. But want to also talk this week about the Water Resources Development Act, the WRDA bill that had previously passed out of the Senate. Phil saw action on the House version of the bill this week. Just real quickly here, what would you say are the key differences and what's the path forward here for the legislation?
Well, the largest difference, frankly, is that the Senate bill is bigger. It includes a lot of drinking water funding and authorization in projects that are not in the House bill, in part because the committee that writes the House bill doesn't have as wide a jurisdiction as the Senate committee does. So the House bill is authorizes about $5 billion. The Senate bill is something over $10 billion. And so that's the largest difference. There are some, Senator Fisher of Nebraska has some language in the Senate bill that to provide some relief to farms on these fuel tank and fertilizer tank regulations that, feed tank regulations that EPA has. So that may be an issue in the negotiations that take place over the next few weeks. Neither bill would authorize the use of lockage fees. That's been a big issue for shippers. They did not want those. They think the government already has enough money with the barge tax revenue. And so neither bill would authorize that. That was very important to agricultural shippers.
Mm-hmm. So still need to see a conference on a WRDA bill before they need those two pieces of legislation to come together and be rectified before anything can be signed by President Obama. But did see some movements on from the House of Representatives on that, so we wanted to make sure you were apprised of that information as well. Phil, Phil, before we let you go, just want to briefly touch on something that had the potential to move in the Senate here in the month of September, didn't end up working, and that being the child nutrition bill out of the Senate. It passed out of the Senate Agriculture Committee, and now it's awaiting movement across the floor. Where do things stand there in the Senate?
Yeah, it's been a long story. This bill actually came out of the committee back in January, if you remember. It was not controversial at all. It was Chairman Pat Roberts and Debbie Stabenow, the ranking Democrat on Senate Agriculture. They put together this compromise bill which gives some permanency to many of the higher school meal standards that the very important to President Obama, and particularly to the First Lady, Michelle Obama, but also gives some relief on things like the sodium requirements in school meals. The problem is they ran into some funding issues. It came in way over budget estimates. They finally got that fixed in recent weeks, but then in order to get it on the Senate floor, they really needed unanimous consent. There were several senators who've raised concerns or questions that they want to get addressed, and so ultimately they couldn't get it across the finish line in the Senate this month. Both Senator Roberts and Senator Stabenow tell me that they're still hopeful of getting this done, getting it passed after the election in that lame duck session. So it's another thing on the to-do list for Congress in December.
Right, so child nutrition remains a subject to watch here for agricultural interests in Washington. And one other key thing that agriculture has been watching here on Capitol Hill being, of course, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And before I let you go, I just want to make you aware of some comments that Majority Leader Mitch McConnell made over on the Senate side of Capitol Hill today. And he said, largely stuck to his guns on the insistence that bill, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, not be voted on this year, something that a lot of ag groups are not going to be happy with, really pushing hard for a lame duck vote. But he said that he kind of, again, stuck to his guns, didn't really anticipate or didn't really leave much room for hedging on whether or not a vote could happen here in 2016, said that's something that needs to be handled by the next president.
Yeah, and I would say House Speaker Paul Ryan talked today too. He did not mention TPP at all as one of their as being on their agenda for the after the election, and didn't even want to talk about it, actually.
Mm-hmm. So not a whole lot of movement on TPP in the month of September, but that's something to watch in the lame duck session because some key leaders did mention the possibility of a lame duck vote. So we'll keep you apprised, and we'll see what happens.
Certainly,
there.
Farm groups are still pushing for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's, again, something to watch, and we'll be sure to keep you up to date on that and many other issues here in the month of September and October and into November. As you may have heard, there's an election coming up, and we will be sure to cover the agricultural side of that election here at agripulse.com. I think that's going to do it for this week. So for Phil Brasher, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.